And at the end of his dream, I should point out, that after these planes went by, they saw mushroom clouds on the horizon. He and his friends in the dream. And he said, well, can somebody deliver a nuclear attack with civilian airliners? And I said, no, that wouldn't be how they do it. He says, well, somehow I feel these airliners are going to attack us. And I said, well, I've never heard of anybody pushing bombs out of airliners. It's not the way to do it. You just drive a truck in. Why deal with an airliner? I said, I've heard of people hijacking airliners, but not as bombs. See, I wasn't as imaginative as Al-Qaeda. By the way, airline hijacking, which Yasser Arafat claims to be the inventor of, he was trained, by the way, by Moscow, was actually invented by a KGB general. And this was recently explained by Ion Pacepa, the #1 defector from communist Romania, who this KGB general basically told him that he had given Arafat the idea. Anyway, Benjamin's dream came true in a way. 4 aircraft were hijacked and were used to attack us on 9/11. The question is, would this lead to World War III? It was very interesting. When Benjamin appeared on the Art Bell program 3 or so weeks ago, a lady in Alaska wrote a letter about this to the Art Bell, to the Coast to Coast website. And I ran it off and I thought I'd share it with you. Because a lot of people who know about my work send me dreams that are like this. And I don't know, maybe a lot of people are just eating bad pizza, but it's kind of interesting. I don't predicate myself on dreams, but it's interesting. This woman, Sarah from Alaska, Anchorage, writes, I'm 40 years old now, and back in my early 20s, I died as a result of a misdiagnosed condition and wrongly prescribed medication. I was gone for a few minutes apparently, but was brought back by some very capable paramedics. Although I had an out-of-body experience, I don't want to go into that here, as it is the transformation I underwent, which led to my ability to have visions that I want to discuss as it pertains to the future of our country. Not long after my death experience, I began having dreams that were unlike any I had experienced before. And if these dreams were recurring, they virtually always came true. As I said, this began in my 20s, and in those days I lived in New Mexico. I dreamed of everything from the mundane to people dying, and about 95% of the time my visions were accurate. While still a New Mexico resident, over 10 years ago I began to have visions of a great war here in the US. These visions were recurring, and not always while I was asleep. I saw many, many tanks, fighter jets, and soldiers, and although I could never identify the nationality of these military forces, there was always the sense that most of them were not ours. All I knew was that these battles were occurring in the southwest United States where I resided at the time. I saw many horrible things done to American civilians, too horrible to describe, but if you can imagine soldiers with nothing but insane hatred for us invading our land, you can imagine the worst war crimes, and that is what I have seen. Approximately 3 years ago, I moved to Anchorage, Alaska due to a job transfer. And after having no battle dreams prior to my move for about 2 years, these dreams started again. Only this time they were a little different. I was actually a participant rather than an observer. Every time I have this vision, I see myself at work, and although I never seem to have any sense of time with these things, since I work the night shift, I assume the following scenario occurs at night. I hear the sudden sounds of jets all around me. I hear explosions and gunfire, mostly automatic, and in what seems like only 20 minutes or so, I hear shouting and more gunfire, only this time very close to my place of business. Suddenly, Russian soldiers shouting and screaming as they fire bursts from their weapons enter my building, and I and several others are immediately taken prisoner. Several are shot on the spot for the slightest resistance, but after determining that my profession is useful to them, an older officer orders that I not be harmed, provided I behave. Anyway, I am taken outside and sort of corralled with other Americans. I can hear the sounds of battle all around me, but to my surprise and horror, most of the fighting seems to be between the invaders and armed and American civilians. Our own military seems not to have withstood the overwhelming attack for very much longer than a half hour or so. Of course, most of our military is overseas. It's not here. I know this is very disturbing, and I know the kind of resistance that people have to this material. I want to close with saying that one of the great psychologists of the 20th century, Carl Jung, also had visions toward the end of his life. He was very old and feeble, and he became worried. In his later works, he called people to Christianity, although he was not an Orthodox Christian himself. He saw 50 years in the future a great global catastrophe, a war. And he warned people that what he thought was the cause of this war spiritually was that people had turned against religion. They turned against the spiritual discipline of seeking to know yourself and to know God, and that people began to accept ideologies that postulated the devil is out there. He called it projecting the shadow. He said that all men have a shadow, a dark side, and that what we do when we are not spiritually seeking is we project our dark side onto other people. A good example is Hitler. Hitler said that the Jews started World War II, and he said that the Jews were out to destroy Germany. And yet it was Hitler who attacked, who invaded, who started the war, and it was Hitler who massacred the Jews. I want to warn everybody about this idea of projecting the shadow. If you look at the communists, the Nazis, the Islamists, they all have a devil. To most of them, we are the devil. The United States of America is the bad guy. They are projecting their shadow. They are blaming us for their own deep, secret, black thoughts. And with that, I would like to open up to questions, if we have time. Yes, the first gentleman.
Yeah. I think that what you presented is pure misinformation.
Pure?
Yeah.
Nothing in it that's true.
I will present some examples. You say 70% of drug trafficking is controlled by Russians, Chinese, and Al-Qaeda, etc. You forgot to mention CIA, who brings most of the drugs into this country.
And your source for that?
Source for that is the speaker who was here at the Granada Forum. He has a book from Arkansas. He was a pilot, and he delivered these drugs into America. And this was by the CIA. Another source is
can I
just a moment. Just a moment.
Okay.
Another source is Michael Rupert, who is COP versus CIA. He confirms this, that CIA, he has documentation that proves. Now, I attended the meeting where George Tenet, I believe, a CIA chief, who was here in Los Angeles, and people were mad at him that he brings drugs into this country. They are in south central Los Angeles, and yet you forgot to mention them, CIA. Now, you spoke about Dudayev, and your basis for that is that Dudayev is an army general. True, there was a Soviet Union, and generals were coming from all nations. When they separated, Dudayev naturally became leader because he was a general. You say, I don't know what happened to him. This is a cover-up. He was not killed. Everyone knows that he was killed.
No, it has not been proven.
Just a
beyond
moment.
doubt.
Okay. Let him respond.
Okay, let me respond to your thing. I'll explain my source. Joseph D. Douglas Jr.'s book, Red Cocaine. He goes through it, his documentation is extensive about the Chinese and Russian drug operations that go back to the 50s. Now I'll respond about the CIA. In the in the Contra resupply operation, there was a CIA agent who was running this resupply operation through Mexico up to Arkansas named Felix Rodriguez. If you look at Terry Reid's book, which is called Compromised, Bush, Clinton, and the CIA, you will find that Israeli agent, Mossad agent Amram Nir, came to Terry Reid, who ran the front company that they were moving the drugs through, that the CIA was moving the drugs through. Amram Nir came to Terry Reid and said, "Did you know that Felix Rodriguez is moving drugs through your company?" And Terry Reid said, "No, I don't." He says, "Check out your warehouse. He is moving drugs through your company." And he said, "And here is the scoop. Mossad has discovered that Felix Rodriguez is a double agent working for the KGB, that he is involving CIA officers in drug running to dirty them, to compromise them, to turn them into double agents, to double them back against the CIA, so that he can control the resupply operation and compromise politicians and CIA officers back in the States. It is the classic red cocaine compromise operation. I'm not making it up. It's in Terry Reid's book. You can read it. Amram Nir was killed not long after this occurred. Terry Reid was able to vindicate himself in his role in this. And as far as Michael Rupert, Michael Rupert's been discredited by serious scholars. I would not take anything that Michael Rupert says at face value. That's my answer to that.
Michael Rupert looks very serious researcher. He has good sources. Do not forget that Michael Rupert was trained by the CIA.
So he says.
He was planted into the Los Angeles police as a CIA agent. He
so
knows
he
a
claims,
lot.
So he claims. But he cannot produce evidence of this.
I don't know. I did not check him, but I do believe him.
Yeah, well, I would call him publicly a liar. That's what I would call him. And a propagandist he is an anti-American propagandist. And you know, he's gone to Moscow and they've rolled out the red carpet for him and treated him like a wonderful person.
You interrupted me when you wanted to say something about Dudayev, and you said nothing.
Okay, about him.
Yeah.
There's a major scholarly work by Sedlekis and Knesses called The War in Chechnya. They go into detail of the evidence of the death of Dudayev in Chechnya. First of all, the main witness for his death is Shamil Baziev, or Shamil Basayev. This is not a credible witness. And what they were able to determine was that the claims that this man was even Chechen, ethnically Chechen, are in doubt. That he did not speak Chechen very well, that his actual background is difficult, and his death by the Russian Air Force allegedly coming in and bombing him. There was this mysterious movements of his wife. There were claims by some of his comrades that he was still alive, and then nothing. So we don't know for sure, and besides, he didn't have an open funeral where people saw his body. And there was no, autopsy or anything, any public thing like that in his death.
I don't know. I read the article that he went into the woods outside to make a phone call on his cellular.
And they zeroed in, a fighter zeroed in, and they sent a missile in and hit his car.
And they destroyed him by the rocket, with the rocket.
There is actually no evidence that this event took place.
Okay, I don't know. I'm saying what I read.
Yeah.
Also, just a moment. Okay, let me object to some other evidence. You mentioned Suvorov.
Yes.
Okay.
My question is, when you look at the people that actually run Germany and that are shaping the direction for Germany, do you see Germany with us, or do you see them with Russia?
Germany is definitely moving into Russia's orbit. Russia has done something very interesting with Germany. Russia has gotten Germany to lend it billions of dollars. I think about half of the money that Russia owes the outside world, which is around $160 to $180 billion, is owed to Germany. German companies and the transfer of German technology to Russian firms and joint ventures. I'll give you an example of one joint venture. They launched a satellite from a Russian ballistic missile submarine in 1999, I think it was. This is quite an achievement, but German technology allowed the Russians to do that. The Russians and Germans, with the Gerhard Schroeder and his government, which consists of people who 25 years ago were Marxists, they were communists, they hated the United States. These people have moved Germany into a kind of alliance with Russia. I mean, it's a de facto economic alliance. But whether Germany is going to be loyal to Russia or the United States is a question, and really all Moscow wants is Germany to be disarmed, neutral, and socialist. Because what Russia wants is to dominate Europe and the Middle East when the United States is out of the picture. Russia's strategy is for the United States to no longer be a great power, so that Russia then can fill the vacuum and control what it believes are the most vital areas of the earth, Europe and the Middle East. Europe for all of its industry and advanced technology and advanced society, and the Middle East for the oil reserves.
Two brief questions. My first question is, hopefully you can verify this. I'm working on what I'll for now call a conspiracy theory until I can prove it out, which is I'm involved against illegal immigration, and I'm seeing how these elements are very well structured, controlled, almost very similar to a special forces type operation, maybe it's Spetsnaz. I want to check out that book that you got there, it's Spetsnaz. It seems parallel to that. Have you seen a connection like this with these pro-illegal alien movements that seem to be maybe some type of arm of this type of situation?
Yes, some of them are definitely communist. I mean, if you look at the National Lawyers Guild, La Raza, years ago when I was in graduate school, I knew a leader in La Raza. And she said to me, you know, I'm leaving. I've got to leave because it's been taken over by Marxist-Leninists, and I can't work with Marxist-Leninists. That's very interesting to me. There are radical communist revolutionaries in Mexico. There was a recent news article saying that the Mexican mafias now are being coordinated by the Russian mafia. That's a very bad sign. That was in the newspaper. And when you have the Russians coordinating, you know, it was the head of the Parliamentary Committee of Inquiry into the Mafia in Italy made a statement to David Remnick, which he quoted in his book, Lenin's Tomb, Pulitzer Prize-winning book. And he said that they had discovered in their studies of the Italian mafia that Russia had become the capital of international organized crime, that even the Italian mafia was looking to Russia for its leadership, for its training, for more sophisticated methods. So, you know, Mexico is our border. It's a joint thing of attack. And Canada, the same thing. Right. There was a secret report come out of, and the reason they want us to have open borders, and they want to use our own laws against us to keep our borders open and keep immigration flowing, because that's how they will attack us. That's how they get the weapons in. That's how they get the Spetsnaz. See, several thousand Russian and several thousand Chinese commandos have to enter the United States. One of the reasons Colonel Lunev, who was in command of 12 nuclear weapons on American soil when he was working for the other side, spoke fluent Chinese was so that he could talk to his Chinese counterpart here. Now you see, there's a report. You can look it up on my website, which is www.jrnyquist.com, Nyquist. There's a report I got. It's a top secret Canadian report called Sidewinder, a joint report by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian Intelligence Service on how China had a treaty with the triads, the Chinese crime organizations, to penetrate Canada, corrupt its politics, and use it as a highway for attacking the United States.
From the north.
Because there's been a lot of influx of Hong Kong Chinese into Canada over the years.
Right. Now, my other question is simply this. This goes into the globalist agenda, if you will. I'm currently seeing being phased in region number 2, which is the Americas, which is Canada, North, Central, South America, FTA, all this jazz. will America overcome this, and then the New World Order comes in at this point and establishes global dominion, or is it the Soviets are planning global dominion, or what's exactly going on here in your situation?
Well, the idea of the New World Order, the idea of the global market and the free trade zone of all the countries in the world, this is a pipe dream. This is the globalists are utopian liberals. In other words, they're fools. This is never going to work. We can see what a mess it's making out of our own country, what NAFTA means, what all these people flooding in, and who knows if we can naturalize them all. The fact of the matter is that we have not defended our borders when we should have. We have not stood up for our national principles, our national integrity. And so all this globalism and everything, it's for useful idiots. And I'm sure the Russians and Chinese just love it. And they're going to exploit it to destroy. They want to wipe out the capitalists. They want to wipe out the Rockefellers and the Council on Foreign Relations. And they're going to. I think they're going to.
Okay, now you pointed out that Russia and China are sources for financing and training and whatever, supplying of technology supplies to the terrorists, and you're absolutely right. But I look beyond that. I look to the financial community, international financial community, and the corporations as being the ultimate source of terrorism. How do I arrive at that conclusion? The international bankers, since the inception of communism in Russia in 1917, used their bankers out of Wall Street, the Schiff family, the Rockefeller family, the Morgan families, to finance the communist experiment in Russia. They sustained communism there through the years by sending their corporations over there, like Westinghouse, Caterpillar, General Electric, IBM, so on and so on and so on. They sent technicians over there to teach the Russians to sustain their communist experiment. FDR recognized Russia in 1933. Why? Because their communist experiment was failing. So the point I'm trying to make is our financial elite here are behind the creation of communism. They're also in Russia, they're also behind the creation of communism in China. In China, the same thing occurred. We had the Kissingers and the Alexander Haigues who started promoting the entrance of our corporations into China. A Chase Manhattan Bank opened in China. Right now, we are providing loans to China with 0% interest, supported by the Export-Import Bank here in the United States. See, our financing is keeping those countries alive. Now, why are they keeping them alive? Because they're using those countries, as a source to sustain the terrorists throughout the world, so that eventually terrorism will be used as a decoy to destabilize the whole world through chaos that will eventually lead to the pretext by the international financial elite, who are always in control, to install a world government. So it's all a decoy, and we have to look at the roots of where it's all at, and it's all at here in our banking centers.
Well, I have a different perspective on this. I would say that there's a book that you ought to read. It's called The Sealed Train, and it actually explains who financed the Bolshevik Revolution. There's also a number of writings about the NEP period in the Soviet Union that explains why the capitalists came in and put all kinds of money into the Soviet Union. It's not exactly what you'd think. To explain the sealed train, in World War I, Germany was fighting a two-front war. The West here, the Russians in the East. They wanted to collapse Russia so that they could get rid of the Eastern Front. They had an agent named Parvus. He thought that Lenin was the ideal maniac to support, for the Germans to support in Russia. They gave Lenin gold. They sent him in a sealed train into Russia. They put money through the Bank of Siberia to support the Bolshevik Revolution. The Kerensky government even discovered this money, and that it was coming from Germany. It was the Kaiser, it was the German Foreign Office, it was the German General Staff that was behind this. And when Lenin took over Russia, they thought that they had Lenin because they could basically reveal this to the world and Lenin would be finished as a revolutionary for taking money from them. The story that Jacob Schiff and these others gave money to the Bolshevik Revolution is a mistake. Jacob Schiff never gave money to the Bolsheviks. In fact, he gave money to Kolchak. He gave money to the White Army. Now, the confusion comes in that he was anti-Tsar. Jacob Schiff was anti-Czar, and during the Russo-Japanese War, he gave money to inspire a revolution in Russia by sending Russian POWs back from captivity of the Japanese back into Russia. But he wasn't supporting Bolshevism, he was just supporting revolution in Russia. And when a lot of people called for, because they hated the Tsarist regime because of its anti-Semitism, when people in the Jewish community called for supporting the Bolsheviks, Jacob Schiff was very strong in saying no. And in fact, when this libel came out against Schiff, his friends urged him to sue, and he refused. He said, I'm not going to sue over this. But a lawsuit did take place against Henry Ford, who basically gave wind to this propaganda, and Ford lost in court. He had to admit that the allegation against Schiff was wrong. So this has been settled in court already. This is a libel.
Well, Jacob Schiff, if you read the book, Another Call It Conspiracy by Gary Allen, Jacob Schiff appropriated $20 million to the Bolshevik Revolution. Lenin was given $5 million. I think it came directly also from Wall Street banks.
Yeah, I've looked
so
at...
was Trotsky.
Yeah,
Trotsky trained at a Rockefeller warehouse in New York City. That's where he trained most of the revolutionaries who then who went through Canada, then went all the way through, I believe, Switzerland, landed in Russia, and that was the Bolshevik Revolution.
Well, I researched this, and I looked at where all these allegations come from, and they have no foundation. They're not true. And in fact, like I said, in the 1920s...
Gary Allen wrote that book. He took that from Tragedy and Hope. Tragedy and Hope now was the
Tragedy
book
and Hope did not discuss Jacob Schiff giving money to the Bolsheviks.
I believe it did. But there's other sources also. Anthony Sutton goes right into that also.
Anthony Sutton actually doesn't say that Schiff gave money to the Bolsheviks.
Well, I tell you, I read several books.
Yeah.
The same factors show up on these different books.
Yeah, this is a mistake. Let me explain the difference between capitalists and communists, the real difference. A capitalist is someone who believes that power comes out of money. A communist is someone who believes that power comes out of the barrel of a gun. The communist is someone who wants to say to the capitalist, all right, you have all the money, we'll have all the guns, then stick them up. We'll have all the money and all the guns. That's what the Bolshevik believes. He believes in guns over money. So there is this big difference. And you see, what has happened is the capitalists have tried to use their money to try to woo the communist countries and bring them back. And the communists, knowing this, have pretended. NEP in Russia was another, communism collapsed. Lenin said, communism is done, we got to go back into capitalism back in the 20s. They had the same thing that we just went through in the 90s, they had it in the 20s, and all kinds of capitalist countries went in because there's millions of people in Russia, there's millions of customers. So they sunk a lot of money into Russia. And guess what? They lost it all when the Russians